Hi there, good afternoon. Tens of thousands of mourners have lined the streets of Louisville as the world prepares to say goodbye to perhaps the greatest sportsman of all time. His funeral procession has started. We are, of course, talking about Muhammad Ali. We're joined in the studio by Sky Sports' Adam Smith, boxing historian Bob Mee, and, of course, Sky Sports' Glenn McCrory as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming in today. It is a sad day ahead, of course, but also a chance to celebrate what was an incredible life as well. These are the... we're going to see the latest pictures of the procession in a moment. But, Adam, we've just been talking there in the break about the numbers of people that are going to be lining the streets today and the reaction that this death of Muhammad Ali a week ago today has had. Have you ever known anything like it?
Well, we were just mentioning that in the break. No, I don't think so. Glenn was talking about George Best, but George Best, of course, in the sporting world was very much here, a home hero. But in terms of international, in terms of worldwide appeal, affection, the name that was known, not just Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, the man that evolved into it, I don't think so. I don't.
I think it's because he's more than a sportsman.
Yeah.
He made, massive changes. He stuck his neck out. He was a man that had everything and give everything up for his beliefs, which is a mark of what a fantastic person he was.
And that was his peak time, Bob, as a fighter.
Yeah, that's right. He lost the years from 25 to 28, and he was based so much on speed and movement and things happening in a blurring split second that other boxers of that time couldn't deal with at all, hadn't seen before. And then after the layoff, he was slower, he was older, his body had changed, and he had to almost learn how to be great again.
But the pictures we're
the
seeing,
noise yeah, the noise
pictures we're seeing now. I mean, it still excites me like I was a kid again, because I used to get goosebumps when he'd come on TV. He was that good.
Look at the microphones there before anything that we've got now, the digital age and all of that. Look at that.
Well, I mean, he rightly called himself. He named himself. He wasn't the most modest. He named himself the greatest. But then to live up to that, it was almost everything he did, he lived up to, and that was what made him extra special. When he beat George Foreman, I mean, he was a massive underdog. So many times in his career, he was a massive underdog, and then shook the world. And then, that's what it did there.
And he brought that drama. Look at that with Frazier and the trilogies with Frazier, with Norton, the great era as well of heavyweights there. I mean, it was a golden age, Bob.
Yeah, and here he is with Foreman and Spinks at the end of his career, when I think most people had hoped he'd got the message and stopped. But this now we're looking at pictures of what took him to the rest of the world, almost took him outside sport and made him something extraordinary, something mysterious at the start in an America that was volatile and
Bob,
difficult.
when you think of that, I mean, Bob just touched the bravery of a man to stand up, to adopt that stance at a time, when it was, it was terrible at times for Black America. They were suffering terribly, and he stood up. He didn't have to do that. He did that for his people, and he took a stand in a dangerous country, and that
became a figurehead because he gave up those peak years, and then the courage in the latter part of his life. Courage, I think, is a huge word to sum up Muhammad Ali. And for me, that lighting of the Atlanta flame, that image will always live with me. The bravery of the man to stand there in front of millions and do that.
Both parts of his life, one when he was the greatest and he shook the world and he shone as a great athlete and a beautiful looking man, and then later, when he was trapped inside an illness and a body, and yet in both parts of that life, he did it humbly, he did it with humility, he did it with dignity, and I think that's why he was so great. And
that's why there's going to be so many different speakers later on at the actual funeral service, whether it's Bill Clinton or whether you've got someone from the movie world, the diplomats. They all want to be there because he touched so many people. So there's...
Well, that was what I was going to say. Like you say, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama is given his apologies for not being there today, but Will Smith, the actor, huge names, and that underlines, doesn't it, sort of what an effect Muhammad Ali had on a worldwide audience.
Listen, it's not just in boxing. You know, we're always looking at the trade paper Boxing News, which is you know, front to back, covered in tributes, in stories. It was always going to be from our world, but this is the whole world coming together, and I think in sport this is such a rarity.
And just to see the cars there, I mean, it is just... Have you ever seen anything? I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, with car after car after car. I mean, you know, the whole of Louisville has come to a standstill, but I think the whole sporting world will have an eye on today. You know, it's a sad day, but it's also a day in a way for celebration, to celebrate the life of somebody, you know, who changed the world for the good.
Spontaneous cheers from the couple of thousand or so people that are lining the perimeter of this funeral home. The cortege cars have returned here. They've been away for about an hour, conducting, as I understand it, a rehearsal at Cave Hill Cemetery, involving all the chief mourners, including the pallbearers like Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson, Will Smith, who earned an Academy Award nomination for playing Ali in the biopic a few years ago. But you can see now, and it's a difficult logistical exercise, this, to get 13 stretch limos into this space, along with the police cars as well. I think we're in the last moments before they will form up properly and then head off into downtown itself. But I caught up with Lennox Lewis myself briefly in the city yesterday. He came and gave me a punch on the arm as I was sitting in a pavement-side cafe. But I think his official statement that he released with regard to how humbled, how excited he feels about being a part of this ceremony is worth reading again. He says he was humbled and honoured beyond words to help see my hero Muhammad Ali off to his final resting place. Ali has always been an enormous inspiration to me, not only in my boxing career, but also in life. His journey began 74 years ago, and in that time he not only transformed the world of sport, he used sport to transform the world. So we'll just stand by here. We'll keep an eye on this. We'll perhaps come round and just to see where the throngs of people are waiting to wave their favourite son off to his final resting place at Cave Hill Cemetery. But yeah, it's a bit of a traffic jam at the moment in here. Very well organised, everything has been all week, I have to say. Well organised, but also laid back enough to allow people up close to the champion himself. You wonder if this had taken place in other countries where people would be allowed to get this close to the funeral home itself. That's what Ali wanted. He wanted the public to have prime place rather than the media or anyone else in these important ceremonies. So we'll keep an eye on this, and as soon as the motorcade leaves, of course, we'll be right back here.
We're going to see so many famous faces today. Of course, Ali's family as well, his fourth wife, Lonnie, his brother, who Bob was speaking about earlier, Rahman Ali, his daughters, Mariam and Rashida as well. We also learnt earlier that joining the likes of Lennox Lewis and Will Smith as a pallbearer, Mike Tyson would also be part of the procession and a pallbearer for the funeral. And I think we're going to see Mike in a moment, who's... I understand got the earliest flight that he could this morning. It was very much a late decision from Mike, and there he is. He's arrived in Louisville, that now famous tattoo on his face. And he'll be alongside Lennox Lewis, who of course he famously lost to in 2002 in the ring, and those two will be side by side. Just a couple of the very famous faces that we're going to see today.
As you've seen, the family are here, so we expect the cortege to leave any minute. Huge crowds around. I can count, if we have a look up there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 helicopters in the sky, all offering different pictures to various networks. To pick up on the discussion just been having in the studio with the guys, it's fascinating when you visit Ali's streets, just to note how many athletes that couple of blocks produced. There are a couple of NBA stars. They're also entrepreneurs, recording artists. It was a black middle-class aspirational area. It was an ambitious place, and obviously Central High had a good athletics program as well, but we've also been observing just how close and embedded Ali was in the community. Gentleman here, Mr. White, this is you.
Yeah.
This is you how many years ago?
Oh, I was 6 years old.
And just explain to me the circumstances in which Muhammad Ali came to play a well-known board game with you.
Well, he was in town down to his mother's house, and anytime he came in town, the kids in the neighborhood would go over to his house. So just happened to go over there that day, and he was playing Monopoly.
Do you know what year that was?
It was about 62, 63.
So just before he'd won the Olympics, and just before he was going into challenge for the title.
The Olympics,
Yeah.
and he was champion.
Yeah. Oh, so he'd beaten Sonny Liston by then.
Yes. So we just happened to be over in the neighborhood, and he was home. So we went down to his house, and his mother's house, and he was there playing Monopoly.
What was it he had? What set him apart? Yes, I've been saying there's been good athletes and sportsmen from this city in a number of different sports, but what X factor do you think he had that set him apart?
Confidence, his confidence in himself and his fellow man, but his confidence was out of the roof. I mean, anything he did, he knew he was going to succeed at it. And he always gave that confidence to somebody else. So that's it. I mean, he's a great man.
Wonderful for sharing that wonderful image and time in your life with him. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the stories keep piling up. You almost feel as though it's almost impossible that Ali could have met all the people that everyone here claims he has. You think it's like the largest high school class in the history of education. But we'll just bring you around here finally, just to take one last look at the scene. You can see people young and old here. Many of the kids carrying butterflies. That's a little idea the mayor had to sort of reinvent Ali's float like a butterfly, sting like a bee mantra. He wants the butterfly to represent the spirit of Ali, which from this point on will still carry his legacy to the youth of this city, this nation, and indeed the world.
Nobody expected this kid who'd been floored by Henry Cooper only 8 months before in his previous fight. He'd happened to come back and stop Cooper, but the defining image of that fight was of Ali on the seat of his pants from Cooper's left hook. People thought Liston was going to do the same in 1, 2, 3 rounds, and it didn't happen. This young, brash kid did the unthinkable. He tamed a man who'd lost once in his life way back when he broke his jaw in an early fight in his career, and had been unbeatable, avoided, feared ever since. And Ali just changed boxing in that hour.
I shook up the world.
What a scene this is. Now, this is a sleepy suburb of Louisville, 10 miles out of town, normally very quiet, but look at these poor individuals' front garden. It's been turned into, well, it's an international incident. We've got Ruth and Sandy here, whose property this is. Are you happy to host the world and everyone else on your front lawn?
Of course we are. Of course we are. He was a big spokesman for our city. Yeah, so we are, of course, glad to have it in our neighborhood. A little surprised it's in our neighborhood, but
we were surprised it's in our neighborhood. It's been very quiet all week, though.
Is the explanation for that perhaps there is a family connection with this part of town? Muhammad's mother lived in the vicinity?
She lived across the street from our church. In her later years, he bought her a home out in this vicinity across the street from our St. Bartholomew Church, right down the road here. So, yeah.
It's quite a journey, Muhammad Ali's life. We've been reflecting on that with various people all week. What do you think about the journey perhaps America in general has been on in terms of their attitude to Ali and how it's changed over the years? From those dark days in the 60s when he was stripped of his title and there was so much controversy, how have opinions changed?
Well, they have changed a lot. They've accepted it because a lot of people had those opinions but were afraid to speak up. And he was never afraid to speak up.
No.
So
he used his award, his championship, to champion the cause for racial equality. I mean, he spoke up in a time when it was very hostile here, very hostile.
Straight back to Louisville now because, gentlemen, this is the pallbearers making their way out. You can see Mike Tyson there on the left-hand side, and I'm sure Will Smith there, a couple behind, and Adam, I'm sure you'll recognise one or two others as well in there.
I know how honoured he is to be playing such a role.
And there's the moment, there is the coffin of Muhammad Ali making its way out of the funeral home. And these are the iconic pictures that we've been waiting for all afternoon, Adam.
And this is where sadness hits us as well.
I'm not here as part of the media. I'm here as another boxing fan who grew up with stories of Muhammad Ali, and he was an inspiration to the people of the UK and people of my generation as much as he was, I think, to all those lining the route here. Amongst the various billboards and sayings of Muhammad Ali dotted around town, there's one in particular that the local university have up. It's "Don't count the days, make the days count." And I think on a day like today, that really does hold true. This was a man who, in all of his 74 years, lived every day to the absolute fullest and extracted everything he could out of his life. Even in the 32-year battle with Parkinson's, where he struggled in the latter years to communicate, he was still hugely influential for good causes. The police just clearing the way now, so we should expect the car past soon. Speaking to people here, I just wonder now what the reaction will be when Muhammad Ali himself comes out. I think there will be loud cheers. It is just a day like no other, this. And reflecting as well on, as we have during the course of this morning, about the journey, not just that Muhammad Ali has made, but that Louisville has made. This was a young man who grew up going to segregated schools. We've discussed the story of how after his Olympic gold he wasn't served food in a local restaurant. Perhaps a little bit of mythology, but the fact is that could very well have happened. That was the South in those days, in the 60s. Now we look around and we see people of all races joined together, sharing happy memories of Muhammad Ali and looking at ways that his life and inspiration can have a bearing on the next generation. Muhammad Ali said back in the 1960s, "I am America. I am the part you don't recognize." Cocky, confident, black. My name, not yours. My religion, not yours. My goals, my own. Get used to me. He wasn't someone that was forced to be what the society he grew up in wanted him to be. He was able to turn that society around to the way he saw things. And I think that's perhaps the great appreciation of what he was able to do.
I remember him when I was a kid. We're only like 12 years apart, but he used to come into the skating ring where we were, and he used to pretend like he was all our uncles, and we would run to him. He was just that kind of guy. So it is bittersweet, and we would stand out here for another 10 hours just to see and say goodbye and honor a great man.
The Muhammad Ali Center. Muhammad Ali Boulevard, named after him back in 1978 after he'd captured the world title for a record third time. And then it'll be into his home neighborhoods. 3302 Grand Avenue was where he grew up. It's been a remarkable place to experience this week. A lot of tears will doubtless be shed there before he'll pass his old school, Central High, his old Columbia gym, where he learned the tricks of the trade that would serve him so well, before finally arriving at Cave Hill Cemetery. Spontaneous applause and respectful cheers, I think, here, as you see some of the mourners waving out the windows. They don't want this to be an unhappy day. Lennox Lewis going by with Mike Tyson on the other side of him in the same car. It's going to be a very, very emotional day, and these next hours, I think, will be something very special indeed.
We talked about Muhammad Ali and being there on the day that Barack Obama was sworn in as the first black American president. Barack Obama can't be at the funeral today because he's attending his daughter's graduation, but he has just released this message from the White House.
I have had to slug it out a little bit here in Washington, and there have been times where I've been the underdog, just like the champ. There have been times where I got beat up a little bit and had to come back, and that sense of resilience, that's what these boxing gloves represent to me. So I just want to say to not just all the fans around the world who drew such inspiration from Muhammad Ali, but most importantly to his family, to Lonnie and the kids and everybody who I know is celebrating a life during this week. It's very rare where a figure captures the imagination of the entire world. And it's even rarer when that figure does so by being open and funny and generous and courageous. He was one of a kind. And in my book, he'll always be the greatest.
Well, Muhammad Ali is making his final journey through his hometown. The procession carrying his coffin past a number of significant places in his life, his childhood home, the Ali Center, the Center for African American Heritage, and then down the Muhammad Ali Boulevard. It will end at the Cave Hill Cemetery, where Ali will be laid to rest in a private ceremony later on today.
A whole range of emotions, I think, on display in Louisville today. There's been a lot of celebration. I mean, the cortege, and we can talk about its continued procedure around this city. Johnny Nelson, a 20-mile route it's taking around important places with regard to Muhammad Ali's life. But it's been greeted by cheers everywhere, but they've been respectful cheers too. There is a sense of loss amidst all of this, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I think, as I said yesterday at the prayers, that was the first somber feeling I had about it all when I saw his daughters crying. I saw members of his close entourage crying. I thought someone's father's passed away, someone's husband, someone's friend, and that's when you look at it. I thought it was more of a celebration of his life and what he brought to the world of sport. In Louisville now, it's a chance for them all to say goodbye. That's why they're doing this. They drive around Louisville to say, look, this is where he's been. He's taking him back to the people. For Ali, he was involved in arranging his own funeral. He wanted this. This is how he wanted to say goodbye to everybody. And so this is calculated. This is exactly what he wanted to do, and this is exactly how he's played out.
Lennox Lewis on board with Mike Tyson. That was a great heavyweight era. Ali's era, however, was unmatched. A couple of the honorary pallbearers are guys he fought against. We've got George Chuvalo. We've also got Larry Holmes.
Yeah.
Now, that's a career to conjure with, I think. Was it to his great misfortune that he was to follow Ali as heavyweight champ?
It was a curse. Larry Holmes was a brilliant fighter, but because of the man he beat in Ali, I think he was cursed then, because people just didn't like the fact that he beat Ali. And Larry Holmes was a really good fighter. Larry Holmes was Ali's sparring partner for many, many years, so he knew he had his number. And ever since then, that's kind of overshadowed his career, and it frustrates him. And when we had him on the ringside set, and he spoke about that, and he said, look, I had to beat him every day of the week. You know, it was my time. But for me to say that publicly is very distasteful, and it was just the wrong time for him to fight me. It shouldn't have happened.
It's a nice touch for him to be an honorary pallbearer, and it shows the camaraderie between guys who've shared the ring. But finally, we have to address this difficult question with regard to, did he have fights too many, including that Holmes fight, and what kind of in circumstances, what compelled him perhaps to carry on when better advice would have made him stop?
I think most will say yes, he had far too many fights. He should have probably retired after the Fraser fight.
Ali we're talking about.
Ali should have retired probably after the Fraser fight. It wasn't about the money, not for Ali anyway. It could have been that could have been a motive around the entourage. And at times when a fighter has passed it, that's when he needs the truth. He needs his friends to say, look, you've had your time, walk away, your timing's gone, and you want people to be honest with you. I don't think Ali had that circle around him to be honest with him. And you know, Dundee, his entourage could have said, Ali, let it go. It was not about money for Ali, and the way the man is, the way the man's presenting himself, clearly that's not been his motivation. So yes, he boxed on too long, and most people will tell you that. Yes, I believe it might have contributed to the speed up of the Parkinson's disease. I do believe that, and it's sad. And maybe Lennox Lewis is the one that stopped that rot and said, no, when I've done, I'm out of here. And when he retired, he stayed retired, and he set an example for the youngsters coming through. But Ali, he loved his game, and that's what he wanted to do.
Muhammad may have challenged his government, but he never ran from it or from America. He loved this country, and he understood the hard choices that are born of freedom. I think he saw a nation's soul measured by the soul of its people. For his part, he saw the good soul in everyone. And if you were one of the lucky ones to have met him, you know what I meant. He awoke every morning thinking about his own salvation, and he would often say, I just want to get to heaven. and I've got to do a lot of good deeds to get there. And I think Muhammad's hope is that his life provides some guidance on how we might achieve for all people what we aspire for ourselves and our families. Thank you.
Here on this soil, American soil, in the Middle East or anywhere else in this world, we crave for peace. The peace that you rest in now. We will forever cherish the 74 years you graced this earth. You will be greatly missed. But now, we send you off in celebration, a blown kiss and prayers as you enter your final round. God's last boxing bell will sound in heaven. I love you. We all love you.
Muhammad Ali struck us in the middle of America's darkest night, in the heart of its most threatening gathering storm. His power toppled the mightiest of foes, and his intense light shined on America. And we were able to see clearly injustice, inequality, poverty, pride, self-realization, courage, laughter, love, joy, and religious freedom for all. Ali forced us to take a look at ourselves. This brash young man who thrilled us, angered us, confused, and challenged us ultimately became a silent messenger of peace, who taught us that life is best when you build bridges between people, not walls. My friends, only once in 1,000 years or so do we get to hear a Mozart or see a Picasso, read a Shakespeare. Ali was one of them, and yet, at his heart, he was still a kid from Louisville who ran with the gods and walked with the crippled and smiled at the foolishness of it all. He is gone, but he will never die. He was my big brother. Thank you.
More than 3 decades of his life would be circumscribed in ways that would be chilling to the naked eye. But with the free spirit, it made his life bigger, not smaller. Because other people, all of us, unlettered, unschooled, in the unleashing said, well, would you look at that? Look at that. May not be able to run across a ring anymore. May not be able to dodge everybody and exhaust everybody anymore. And he's bigger than ever because he is a free man of faith, sharing the gifts we all have. We should honor him by letting our gifts go among the world as he did. God bless you, my friend. Go in peace.